Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to join us at the remote CSI webinar and to come and hear me speak about a project I'm really, really passionate about, which is going to be talking today about a project that I put together in collaboration with LearnSci, looking at digital forensic science resources in higher education teaching. I do have a Twitter at the bottom as well, which I put out lots of random content about teaching and forensic science and CSI. So if you do want to follow me on that, please do. And I will probably pop that in the chat along with my email in case anyone wants to get in contact with me and chat further about anything we're going to talk to you about today. So first things first, probably want to know a little bit about me and where I come from and who I am exactly. So I will, oh, here we go. Basically, this is my little roadmap journey, just to give you a bit of my background and where I come from. So I'm not originally from Birmingham or the West Midlands. I actually came from a sunny little town called St Mary down in Exeter in Devon. And I actually came to Birmingham to do my degree, which I did at the University of Birmingham in medical science. And that's where my kind of interest in forensic science and DNA analysis kind of stemmed from in my final year. And on the back of that, I actually went to work at the Forensic Science Service. I know I've got a fellow alumni from the Forensic Science Service online today, where I did DNA profiling as a forensic scientist for a couple of years. So that's sort of my sort of starter background. But I got a bit of itchy feet, felt like I didn't want to be sat in the lab all day, every day, wanted a bit more of a challenge. And that's when I joined West Midlands Police. Where I was there for 20 years, so quite a long time, starting as a CSI, and then I progressed to become crime scene manager and a crime scene coordinator, which is coordinating the forensic response to major incidents and primarily murders and attempt murder, sort of major crime. So I've sort of been involved in a lot of different cases to do with managing murders and things like that. I then sort of dabbled a little bit in management. I led the crime scene coordinator team. I also dabbled as being a footwear team leader and fingerprint development lab team leader. I then went off on to maternity, came back as the forensic scene investigation team and technical manager. That was a little bit of a shock to the system, so I came back into the world of ISO and the Forensic Science Regulator and accreditation, and had, I think it was 18 months to implement ISO 17020 accreditation in the forensic scene investigation team, which was a challenge, and we did do it, so that was great. But during the time at West Midlands Police, I'd been dabbling a little bit in guest lecturing. So the University of Wolverhampton had contacted us looking for guest lecturing in crime scene investigation, which I put my name forward for, and I had been doing that for 5 or 6 years anyway, just doing some case studies and guest lecturing at the university. So when the opportunity came up for a permanent job there, it was a really, really tough decision because I've been 20 years in the police, I'm very institutionalised in West Midlands Police, but it was such a great opportunity, such an exciting opportunity to do something a little bit different and sort of share my knowledge and enthusiasm for all things forensic science and CSI. So I started at the university last March. So I've been there a year now, and it has been brilliant, brilliant journey, challenging in my first year, but really, really exciting. So just to give you an idea of, just get my PowerPoint to move, which it's not at the moment. There we go. Oh, let's go back again. So just to give you an idea, there's some little things about what I do. So as we know, I've started in crime scene examination and major crime coordination. I was scrolling through looking for some bits and pieces about it, and I found that I'd appeared in the New York Times, which was quite interesting. So that's me on the left bending down pointing at something very important, because I was involved in the management of the 3 murders in Birmingham during the riots 10 years ago. But since then, yes, I've progressed into teaching, and that means teaching students, doing outreach work, and I've really thoroughly enjoyed my journey so far. So just bear with me, I'm having some problems with moving my PowerPoint on. Get to respond. There we go. So last year, this journey began. It was last early summer. Obviously being very excited about, what I could do in terms of teaching and changing things at the university to make it more real life, more practicable in terms of crime scene investigation and forensic science. And my boss, Dr. Gina Manning, had been at a conference in London, and she'd been talking to the LearnSci chief execs, and she very kindly said, I know someone who you might want to talk to, which was me. And I had been learning about all the new university systems and resources that were available, and we were sent on a course for LearnSci to learn all about the LearnSci resources. And I was listening in, thinking, oh, it's very interesting. There's a lot of lab simulations for chemistry and biology here. And I kind of just sort of put my hand up and said, do you do anything for forensic science at all? And they kind of went, no, but we'd be interested in talking to you about it. And then my boss met the chief execs, and then we kind of just got together, had a chat with the guys at LearnSci, and we decided to basically form a collaboration. So it just started, as I say, with a journey, a meeting with the chief execs, sort of sharing our vision, what I wanted to sort of see happen in terms of academia, to see more sort of practical resources and more real life scene resources available for students to get that real understanding of critical thinking at a crime scene and forensic strategy. So we started chatting about what digital interactive resources we could develop for forensic science teaching. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about LearnSci for those that that are not familiar. They are a really interesting company, quite a small company. They're sort of like a bit of a startup company, and they've just expanded and expanded. Their mission is to enable the next generation of scientists to develop the skills needed to make the world a better place. That's a really great mission. That's a very similar sort of value and ethic that I share. We need to equip our students with skills and knowledge and experience in forensic science to go out there and make a contribution, effective contribution to the criminal justice system. So very similar sort of ethic about what we wanted to do. And as I say, I'm not going to read it all out, but these are just some of the things that they do as a company. And it's all about the student experience. They primarily create digital resources to try and enhance that student experience. They use, as I can testify to, that they do use a world-class team of web developers and designers, because I've worked with them. Very interactive, there's lots of feedback and a really collaborative partnership. And they use these tools to basically really enhance that student engagement and student experience. The benefits for us as teachers and lecturers is some of these activities and assessments can be automatically marked in the worksheets. So it helps us with our marking, and also they're equipped to sort of give us that insight into how the student is managing those tasks, any feedback that they have, to help us tailor our student learning and that sort of constructive alignment journey. And they just really support us to help support the journey, the students' learning journey. Recently as well, we were very proud to be in partnership with them. They won the King's Award for Enterprise and Innovation this year as well. So and they're all very proud of that, and very kindly have dedicated it to the educators that they work with as well. So really proud moment for them, and a proud moment for me, having worked with them. So that's fantastic. So after sitting down with the chief execs and then sitting down with the design team, we started to put out some objectives of what we want to achieve from this collaboration. I had an idea in my head of what I wanted to do. I had a sort of vision, which I tried to put down on paper in a bit of a diagram, just to show them this is kind of what I was thinking. it was, and they sort of took that away as a sort of basis for what we were going to do. But the main thing I sort of wanted to focus on is that forensic science is very much an applied science, and CSI particularly a very practical experience. When we're talking about crime scene investigation, we're talking about doing a practical job at a crime scene that involves people. It's never going to be fully be able to do automated by machines or anything else, because we need that that sort of critical thinking and those observation skills and the ability to reflect and review at crime scenes as well. So how are we going to translate that into a digital online tool? It was really essential for me to make sure that any CSI theory I was teaching is practically applied, because of that, to enhance that learning and to give them that practical experience. There's no good me talking in my CSI theory module, talking about all the forensic science things they should be doing at crime scenes, unless they're able to practically apply it. So that was a really key part of this. However, the challenge that I faced when I came here was I am the only crime scene practitioner in our department. Everyone else comes from an academic or a more sort of biological or anthropological background. CSI does form a large part of forensic science, starting with the investigation. And the challenge I faced was, there was just me with 45 students that I had to get through a crime scene practice module. And with our scene house, we only have only 3 actual rooms, and then we utilise a vehicle and a garage as a scene as well. So we only had five rooms and 45 students and me. So how was I going to go about if using my time really effectively to be able to engage with the students and talk with them and reflect through what they're doing and ask questions of them? So that was kind of the challenge we had, and we've still not really overcome that challenge specifically, but this tool and this project have really helped enhance and prepare the students for their crime scene practice module. So our objective basically was to develop resources for maximising that CSI learning and practice within those limitations of practical scene house teaching. And the answer was to develop new transformative digital LearnSci smart worksheets. This was at the suggestion of LearnSci. When I sort of gave them my vision, they said, "Oh, we think, smart worksheets might be the way to go." And do a simulation activity of a crime scene where a student would have the ability to explore the principles of crime scene management and then be able to go in and interact with a CSI crime scene, and that fulfilled like the learning outcomes of what we were trying to achieve. Ooh, sorry, you have to bear with me. I do have a bit of an underlying cough. So I presented my vision. We had a good chat. LearnSci proposed that the smart worksheet would be the way to go. But they wanted to add a twist to it, which is I'll tell you about in a little bit, that it was a slightly different to what they had done with other LearnSci resources for other sciences. So I set some learning outcomes of what I wanted this resource to do. And for me, coming from my crime scene practice background and crime scene manager and forensic manager background, I know that it's really important to have observation skills, to be able to look around at your crime scene and note things of importance and have that meticulous approach, that fine detail observation and searching skills to make sure you can undertake a really effective visual examination and identify the information and the evidence that you will need to recover and need in the interpretation of a crime scene or scene. It's really important. Something I emphasise to all my students is critical thinking. I don't want them to just look at a crime scene and just say, yes, that's there, that's there, that's there. I want them to think, what does that mean? What is the strategy for recovery going to be around that? What is our hypotheses? Are there lots of hypotheses that we're going to narrow down by elimination from evidence and scene interpretation down to our final hypotheses? and also applying that critical thinking to forensic strategy development for scene examination, with the introduction of ISO 17020 accreditation within police forces and forensic service providers. It's really important that we get forensic strategy right in the optimum sequential order to minimise the potential of contamination and any sort of disturbance or destruction or degradation of evidence. So that's a really key part of ISO accreditation now. The learning objectives for the scene management aspect was around, which obviously takes place before your, I should have put that first really, takes place before your incident scene assessment, is basically getting information gathering, making sure we have the information and we're equipped with all the information that we need to go in and perform our role as a crime scene examiner within the scene. That includes making sure we have health and safety and hazard information for our health and safety risk assessment, really key before we go into any crime scene, and undertaking sort of initial actions before entering the crime scene to ensure that it is safe for yourself and others, it's secure, and it's preserved to prevent any, as I mentioned, any degradation, loss or contamination of evidence. So these were the learning objectives that I'd sort of come up with that I wanted from this resource. So again, that was provided to sort of LearnSci along with my vision. And we started discussing how we were going to go about building a smart worksheet that would really fulfill these objectives and learning outcomes. So the process was, it sort of took about 3 months of sort of over the summer last year of several meetings. We had interactive Google Sheets that we could add to each, and they had a platform where I could enter this digital crime scene that they were developing and add notes. And they could enter it and say, well, we've done this, what do you think, Becky? And I could go in and say, actually, I think this needs to be moved here. So we would go through processes of doing that between meetings, and then we'd get together on meetings, usually on Thursday, and they would ask me what I thought of what they'd done so far. I would give them sort of some advice and say, this is the sort of image I'm looking for, this would how it would be in reality, and then they would go away and come back and say, we can't do this, but how does this suit? I said, yeah, that will do, that will cover it. And it was a very, very collaborative and communicative process with myself as a crime scene practitioner and a number of digital resource designers, IT designers, and it was a really creative process. But at the heart of that, there was always two things for me, primarily the student experience. What are they going to get out of this? Is it going to be engaging for them? Are they going to see the relevance to actual crime scene examination? Are they going to enjoy doing it, most importantly? Because as we know, student engagement is sometimes a bit of a challenge at the moment. Are they going to go and do this and really get something out of it? And then the other thing for me was to make it as realistic as possible, because what I didn't want was for them to do something and they go, oh, well, we've kind of done it as a bit of a, this is, it's a bit of a game, we can go in and out of the scene, but actually I wanted to make it really realistic. So when we're training and educating our students to go into certain roles, they can go in and have a realistic understanding of what that role is going to involve. So obviously during this process, we were using my professional practice, knowledge and experience, as well as forensic science regulator and ISO guidelines. So I was referring back to the forensic science regulator codes around anti-contamination, to make sure that we're fulfilling that aspect as well, because it's no good teaching the students something that is not accurate as well. And we wanted to make sure that the outcome was a really realistic incident scenario that would fulfill those learning outcomes as per the previous page. So on the right, we have a couple of examples, a couple of screenshots from the initial crime scene management task A of the worksheets. We talk about personal protective equipment, what is the correct personal protective equipment, and then, as per the Forensic Science Regulator guidelines, what order does it need to be put on in as well, because that's something that's been introduced. And another example below is around crime scene preservation, making sure that the interactive had realistic situations. So the police officer standing on the cordon with his logbook, having a cordon, having a common approach path, a scene tent, PPE, liaising with your SIO at the cordon. So making sure all those factors were sort of covered in the work that we were doing. So as I've mentioned, it was a really collaborative process with lots of consultation, lots of feedback, and we just had a really good working relationship. We didn't always agree on things, but we were very keen to always find a way around it, a problem solve that could get this resource built, really. We also introduced summary questions, kind of do a knowledge check. So some of the interactives are you go in and click on things and they will show you information, or you need to try and find something in there. But also we wanted to check that they knew why those things were important. So we had summary questions at the end also. So on this page is an example of the interactive element, the actual crime scene examination element, which is it's their sort of it's the highlight of it. It's the exciting bit, and I know LearnSci are really proud of this interactive. In the top image, you have the plan view of the premises, and by clicking on each room icon, you can click on that, and it will zoom in into that particular room, so you can move around the scene as well. Once in the room, you might be looking for different evidence areas, and it will tell you how far you've got. So the found is, have you found all of the evidence areas? It won't tell you where they are, but you have to try and click on things to try and find them, and it will give you that progress in terms of things found throughout the house, and also the garden as well, which is included. So the elements that we wanted to include, and we did include, are, as mentioned, information gathering, health and safety risk assessment, crime scene preservation, and just overall crime scene management, which feature in task 1. And then moving into the scene, we take on the forensic assessment, priority evidence identification, and also that sequential evidence recovery aspect as well. So as I've already mentioned, that incident scene assessment examination involved, it was a new innovative 360-degree interactive scene. So they were really proud of it. It started off on a piece of graph paper, essentially, with lots of sort of cut and pasted images of what we wanted to look like, and the guys just brought it together to make it into this this interactive scene. So it was such a team effort, and really proud of that team that I was lucky enough to work with in LearnSci as well. As I mentioned, we have summary questions testing each section throughout, but also we had a final summary question. And that was really important for me to include, because I really wanted the students to understand why we do what we do. Why are they studying forensic science and crime scene investigation? Understanding that importance to the criminal justice system, and sort of making them think why it's important that they get their processes and procedures right, with that sort of meticulousness and accuracy, to make sure we can provide that quality and partial evidence, especially in the advent of ISO 17020 accreditation and the Forensic Science Regulator Act as well, which is obviously now in legislation. And it basically was summarising their actions and asking them the question, will the forensic evidence that they have observed so far identify an offender and secure their conviction in court? We know that forensic evidence can identify people, but we also know too well that if that evidence isn't processed correctly in terms of integrity, continuity, and anti-contamination, that it may well be admissible inadmissible in court, and might not secure the conviction of a suspect. So it's just sort of emphasising the importance of why we have to do what we do during this activity as well. So we resulted in, at the end of this, we had 2 end products of interactive LearnSci smart worksheets. They can be used as remote digital learning resources, so used for teaching, but can also be used as formative or summative assessments, as the marking throughout is recorded, and it will give the students an overall how have they done. The other element to add to this is that for every choice they make in the interactives, some feedback is given as to why it is if it's the wrong choice, as to why it's not why it's not the correct choice. And then if they have made the correct choice, they get some positive feedback to say, yes, this is how it would be used. So there's lots of feedback throughout. So it's not just a yes or no answer. You get that students get some understanding and some learning from what they're doing as well. So I think the best thing at this stage, if it's okay with everybody, I'm going to come out of my PowerPoint and I'm going to dive into the interactive itself and just work through or show a couple of the activities to show it in action, basically. So if we bear with me, I will just bring it up. So the first activity on LearnSci is the scene management. Where I'll try and scroll nice and slowly down. We have our learning objectives, so the students know what they're going to get out of this, as with any sort of constructive alignment style teaching, to make sure they know what they're going to be sort of learning in that particular session. We have a scenario, so we give them what I hope is a vaguely realistic scenario, to say what's happened, what is the information that they're likely to receive as a crime scene investigator, what are the things that will happen before CSI attend, and some important information about the golden hour. Just a little bit of information to say why it's that early action of scene preservation is important. It sort of gives some instruction about performing the essential stages of scene management, and then it goes into each of those bullet points, talking about each section. So the information gathering, I want to say, I'm not going to go into full detail with it. It's quite a simple exercise to get started, just using some logical, critical thinking of what's going to be important information that you will have before you enter a crime scene. I'm just going to pick a couple just to show you the feedback aspect. So if you select incorrect answers, you will say that's incorrect. Oh, bear with me, here we go. Back out again. And if you select the correct answers, it will give you some positive feedback. So this is where I test my own knowledge of my own resource to see if I can get ambulance crew the right answer. Correct answer. So it gives you some feedback of the correct answers. And just tells you why it's important and how it will help you in the crime scene. So it gives some positive feedback, and also why certain answers aren't right as well. So it's really sort of give a real sort of information, different way of teaching, different way of learning. We then go down to our PPE section, where you will select each type of PPE, and they will give you options of which one is correct, and you would click on one, and it sort of starts dressing your little CSI person, which is great. So hair tied, so you can choose one or more, and it puts its little mock cap on. Love this bit. 2 pairs of nitrile gloves as per forensic science regulator on our suit. We use a single-use suit. There he goes. And then you want your police boots and your overshoes to protect against any sharp things. And then you finish up with your check your PPE, activity complete, and you've got your dressed your little person, so it's a bit more interactive, a bit more interesting and engaging, and gives it a visual learning as well. And then you will have to put your PPE in the correct order. Let me just move those around like this to put it in the correct order. And then we have our summary questions around, and they sort of give you some options like multiple choice questions there. Just going to have a quick look in the chat. Oh, do let me know if there's any questions people want to ask and you want to interrupt me. Please do let me know. There we go. So summary questions for each section. Move on to health and safety, and this is where we first go into our interactive crime scene, and we hover over our potential areas of hazards, and we can select what the mitigation and what the prevention methods might be for those as well. So we have broken glass, we'd securing rigid container, sharps hazard, you check it and it says correct. And you can do that for a number of health and safety risks in the interactive. Again, some summary questions just to confirm. And then finally on this section, we move to scene preservation. Gives a bit of an introduction around why scene preservation is important. So we have that learning. And then we have our little scene, outdoor scene, and we have to click on 7 areas that are involved in crime scene management and crime scene preservation on here. So for example, you click on the suit and it gives you a little bit of feedback of why that's important. And you've got seven to find in there. So again, gives you that progress as to whether you found them all. And then there are also the crime scene preservation and crime scene management aspects within the scene as well. So for example, click on stepping plates and it will tell you why stepping plates are important for crime scene preservation and management. Again, some summary questions, just do a quick knowledge check. And then we have some overall task 1 summary questions. For example, which is the most important initial action out of the 4 sections? Don't want to answer it. I can test my knowledge. Test my knowledge. Oh, incorrect. No, it's health and safety risk assessment, isn't it? Apologies. There we go. Health and safety. And it will just ask those summary questions just to do a bit of a knowledge check. And then at the end we have our points, how we've done, and a progress report, so the students know whether they've completed all of the activity, whether they need to go back and double check anything, and how they've performed as well. So that's just task 1. I will just quickly go to task 2, which is about assessment and examination once you've completed those initial actions and once you're going into the scene to start your examination. Again, we have our learning outcomes for this around observation, meticulous approach, critical thinking, to make sure that's sort of emphasised before the students start the tasks. We continue with the same scenario, so there's some continuity between the 2 tasks, but we introduce a bit more information which have been obtained from our information gathering as part of the initial, the first task. So, and we sort of say that in the worksheet they'll be undertaking the role of the CSI. So first of all, we come down to our forensic assessment observations, and this is where we start going into our interactive a little bit. So we're looking around. We do have sort of indicators of what the observations of where the particular evidence items of note are, and it will highlight little things within, say, the jacket that might be of use. But from this, the task is to investigate the scenes, identify the areas, and then for themselves to undertake a bit of reflective practice and interpret the circumstances of the scene and start to develop a hypothesis. And the questions afterwards will help test their knowledge on that. So it's an interactive to just identify those scenes, get the information, and then they get tested on the information they've got from that interactive. So it's a good, there's two ways of going about that. In lectures I teach, obviously, that should take contemporaneous notes. So ideally they might be making notes through the interactive, or be testing their knowledge, how well they read the information that was provided to them. The next section on this is the identification of evidence, and this, as I say, this is the thing that LearnSci and I are both most proud of, is the real interactive. So we start with our outdoor scene, our plan of the scene, and we've identified evidence areas in the first task, but we're going to go and zoom in. Here we go. Ooh. Into each room, and we have to identify, we've sort of identified stuff from our observations, but we now, from those observations of things we've seen, identify where that evidential potential is as well. So for example, clicking on the footprints, we've got apparent footwear marks in blood. So you've got apparent blood with potential DNA evidence, footwear evidence for laboratory comparison, and there might be some initial intelligence of a make, model, or size for that. So things like the knife, there's a number of evidence areas on there as well. Blood for DNA evidence, blood spatter, potential cellular DNA evidence, and potential blood fingerprints or latent fingerprints for laboratory chemical treatment. And again, you have a progress box on the right hand side that lets you know whether you've found all the evidence, whether you need to keep searching around. Again, we can zoom through into the kitchen as well, and again click on evidence types there. We can also then progress out into the garden to revisit our jacket left by the offenders, and clicking on the things that are going to be identified as evidence as well. So that's just an example of the interactive. At the moment, we've sort of gone with the basic principles of crime scene management and assessment, but we're very much hoping to expand this potentially as well. Again, the interactive task is knowledge checked with some summary questions as well, to make sure they've sort of read and understood what the evidence types are within that scene. And then the final section for this second task is around forensic strategy, forensic evidence recovery. And this was a little bit of a tricky one, because it's there's several potential options for evidence, and it depends on the circumstances of the scene. What could be your priority evidence for one scene may not be the same for a different scene with different information and different circumstances. So it is a sort of it's a generalization to give students a bit of an idea of thinking about priority evidence for the recovery and potential sequential order for it as well.
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah, the bio. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think that is someone I can hear somebody's might need to turn off your mic. So again, it's just selecting what might be considered primary evidence. So potentially a knife, it might be a murder weapon, potentially blood at the window that might identify an offender who's broken in as part of a burglary. Mobile phones, as we know, digital forensics is accelerating in the world of investigation. They might be left by the offender, might have contacts, might lead to their identification straight away. So it's basically around sort of clicking what your priority evidence would be, what your secondary evidence or evidence you would recover next, and then your tertiary is very much around fingerprinting, to sort of emphasize the fact that fingerprint examination with powders and destructive chemicals should be taken or should be done at the end to avoid destruction of other evidence or contamination of other evidence as well. So it's just sort of going around, sort of selecting those. I haven't completed them all, but it says select more answers. So we've got a couple right. So you'd put so it'd be DNA swabbing, go in this one, coat, books bag, receipt, fibres, pool. I think this is where it's a real test because I haven't been on this for a little while and have to check that I've got it right. So it then gives you some feedback of where these things should sit, and sort of why as well. So the rationale behind the blood pool, just for those not from a CSI background, is if a blood pool's under a victim and they have got a bleeding wound and it's quite obvious that the blood's coming from them and we're quite happy with that, and it's a pool rather than spatter, we wouldn't necessarily swab that because we know it comes from the victim, and all it's going to do is identify the victim. But we'd actually do that by other means. At a post-mortem examination, we'd take a internal blood sample from like the femoral artery to actually do DNA identification and tox and things like that. So yeah, for example, yeah, it said when should you take a sample of the victim's blood for DNA identification and toxicology analysis. So that should be at the post-mortem. And yeah, and then it talks about that as well. So again, we've got the summary questions. Starts rain. Yes, it would change our evidence recovery if it began to rain, because we'd be wanting to think about our outside evidence outside in the garden, making sure that's preserved. And it also emphasises why sequential order of forensic evidence is necessary to prevent contamination, degradation or destruction of potential evidence. And those will give you the answers, and it gives you your marks and points. So that is the overall sort of two worksheets that we've got so far. Again, that summary statement I thought was really, really important to make sure they understand why we're training them in these tasks and why certain elements are so important. They'll just might just want to put on their PPE in a certain order, but the fact that we put on PPE in a certain order helps minimise contamination from ourselves touching the PPE that would then potentially touch items in a crime scene. So it just gets them thinking in those terms, and using impartial and critical thinking. Will the forensic evidence identify that offender and again secure that conviction in court? And again, it does its overall progress. So that's just the sort of the highlights of the two LearnSci smart sheets that we have developed at the moment, and basically focusing on the sort of most interesting sort of bits to get sort of people interested and engaged in sort of that crime scene examination process, but obviously hoping to expand into different areas and emphasize the importance of other areas as well. So what I'll do now is I will just head back into the PowerPoint. So it was really important when chatting with LearnSci, once we had sort of put this together, that obviously we get some feedback to see if I was along the right lines, if they were along the right lines. First of all, there was some consultation with some work groups through LearnSci, particularly from, I suppose, layman's point of view, because I'm thinking from a CSI and a forensic practitioner point of view, to make sure that someone without that prior knowledge could come in and work through those worksheets. So that's what they did. They came and gave us some feedback, and there were some little things we wanted to change around the summary questions, just to make it a bit clearer, make sure those learning outcomes were actually embedded into the worksheets as well. And then the next thing for me was to trial it with my students, because they're going to be the people that will potentially be using it, to see what they thought and try and get their feedback. So what I did in my 5FS001 crime scene investigation theory module, which was in autumn semester last year, I put it down as a formative assessment for them to do about halfway through the term, when they had learnt the theory of some of these concepts, and it was for them to go and sort of have a go at putting the theory I taught them into a sort of halfway house between theory and practical. And LearnSci very kindly set up a SurveyMonkey survey for me that was linked to the assessment, so that the students, upon completing, could complete the survey to find out, you know, was it any good? Because I didn't really know. I'd come up with this idea. We'd worked together to produce this product, and just wanted to know who our customer, who is the students, and what they thought of it. So we had some really promising findings from that survey. 90 to 100% agreeing that the resources were intuitive and were engaging. It was clear to them what they needed to do. They had the right level of instruction. The challenge level was about right. One student said it was a little too easy, and that's to be expected because across your course, you're going to have a range of student engagement and student ability and capability, and some who might find it quite easy to work through. But in terms of being inclusive, in terms of inclusive assessment, we need to try and make sure that it sort of caters to everybody. And they also, which was really nice, that they agreed to improve their confidence of working in forensic scenes when it came to doing our crime scene practice module this semester, in semester 2 in spring, that they felt that they were a bit prepared and they felt a bit more confident about what was going to be expected of them in those crime scene practice practicals. And it was useful knowledge for them in the future as well. Gives them a little bit of an insight to how it works in practicality. 90% agreed or strongly agreed that the feedback was helpful to their learning, but one was neutral. They were neither here nor there. So the sort of overall rating that we were sort of given from that Survey Monkey was 9.1 out of 10, which I thought I was really, really pleased with, that the students were getting something out of it and felt it was really beneficial. So that was really, really pleasing, really, really good to know for me. We had some lovely additional comments that I just wanted to mention, that were, students added of their own sort of volition, saying it was so unique, so fun to do, was amazing too, really enjoyed completing them, found it helped them their learning, put it into practice, reinforce some of the things we were covering in lectures. I don't think it will ever replace theory teaching, but it's something to enhance that, and it's kind of almost a stepping stone between theory and actual crime scene practice practicals. And this is one of my lovely students down at the crime scene house with me, so I just want to include that because I love that picture. Other outcomes from that crime scene investigation theory module, where the assessment was introduced as a formative assessment, with my total 45 students, unfortunately 5 didn't submit their assessment. That sort of happens sometimes. We had 2 fails, but I identified those. They were actually student retakers who had completed the module in a previous year and then were coming back to retake, and unfortunately had failed again. So we had an 84% pass rate, which was pretty good. But in terms of those actually undertaking the assessment, in terms of sort of putting to one side those hadn't submitted the assessment, we had a 95% pass rate, which I felt was really reassuring in terms of student learning and their progression into level 6 as well. So that was really, really pleasing as well. I haven't yet finished my marking for my crime scene practice practicals for this semester. We've undertaken the assessments. We do 7 weeks of practice practicals and then a final assessment practical. We've done that, but I haven't put together all the final marking to come out with grades. But I will keep you posted to see. That's the other sort of marker for me, is to see how that improved their outcomes for this year, or were they good, good outcomes? Had it helped them? So that's going to be really useful to know as well. The other outcome from this, which I'm very, very proud of, is it was submitted, the project that we had done and the resource we had built was submitted to the LearnSci Innovation in Teaching Award, and I was very, very lucky to be a winner of that along with the team. I nominated the LearnSci technical team as well. And it was, because I know it's a LearnSci resource and it's a LearnSci award, but it was selected by an independent international panel of professors and lecturers from around the world. One guy was from Australia as well, so they sort of did it independently. And I was lucky enough to get £200 prize money to invest in teaching and learning resources for my students. So went away and bought some camera equipment for them, because we're managing with minimum cameras for a lot of students. So that will make their teaching photography practicals and their crime scene practice practicals a lot easier when they've got more cameras to be using. So really proud of that as well, especially my first year of teaching as well. So just looking at the future, from the research we've sort of done so far, we found that these interactive resources really do enhance the students' skills, knowledge, and their attainments in crime scene practice, developing their critical thinking and strategy development. And these, as I know, coming from a practitioner's background, are all really essential employability skills for any career in forensic science. They are LearnSci resources, are used nationally and internationally on forensic science courses. I think they supply about 70 unis in the UK, and then, or that might be UK and internationally. So this resource, as I'm really glad to know, hearing from Asuma, that this resource is out and about for other universities in the UK to use, and hopefully really get some benefit for the students out of as well. And the other thing to sort of think about as well is obviously is on the back of the COVID pandemic, is that there is an available online learning resource. Should we ever be back in that situation again for any particular reason, there is a resource available and also to be developed that can assist with a flexible hybrid teaching and also inclusive teaching. I don't think it's ever going to replace actual hands-on forensics, as I've mentioned previously, but it's a resource that is there that we can use for that. And ultimately, the future scope for this resource, I'm really, really hoping that we can do further developments of additional activities such as fingerprint recovery, which would include like powder choices, how to complete a fingerprint lift details properly, which, you know, surprisingly we do struggle with, you know, brush selection surfaces, different surfaces as a mini activity, potentially DNA recovery in different manners, presumptive testing, and even going as far as forensic science specialism such as entomology investigation, and just making it an interactive and potentially about a decomposed body where we can start considering entomology and anthropology too. And also looking to expand the scenario. So we've got a sort of quite straightforward burglary gone wrong murder incidents in the smart worksheets we've got. But looking to expand those with different scene types, increase complexity, to try and really sort of build the resources that are available. So there'll be lots of things to pick and choose from, to either use in teaching and learning, in assessment as well. So yeah, really exciting future for us. So it's my sort of summer project that I do with LearnSci, and I'm hopefully going to meet up with them soon to start thinking about what we're going to do this summer. The other thing that I'm quite interested in as well is court evidence presentation. It's something I've sort of found through a couple of my modules that students struggle with, in terms of you get taught the theory and then all of a sudden you're going in on a court assessment in our mock courtroom, and to provide something in the middle as a stepping stone to help them understand the process, what exactly is going to be happening in an interactive, to give them a bit more confidence in what's going to happen as well. So that's another idea I've got with this as well. And finally, my future is hopefully to develop more of the LearnSci Forensic Science programme, and hopefully continue to share forensic science knowledge and my passion for forensic science with future generations of students and other academic institutes as well. So that's sort of concluding my presentation about this project that I'm really passionate about. And it's kind of over to you guys if you've got any questions you want to ask, or more importantly, if you have been using the resource, if there's any feedback, any things that you don't think quite right, or things that might be useful to change that might help suit your students. So I'd be really excited and really interested to hear from all of you. But thank you very much for listening.